thinking. All right, guys, thank you. Thanks for coming to Mad AI. Today I'm really excited. We have a great speaker right here. Yippee, yippee. Today we're going to learn about AI, building with AI tools, specifically AI tool front ends.
Yep.
And I'm just excited about this because one, I'm not good in building UI UX. That's just one thing that I'm not good at. So like if I can have artificial intelligence do that for me, and I believe I'm going to get shown that, I'm looking forward to that. And two, like I'm amazed by the community. We keep having people come in, and I know we have a number of people online, so thank you. And I just appreciate the support. And then lastly, after this event, we are heading over to have some libations at Paul's Club. So if you guys wish to join us at that point, we can have like a discussion afterwards as well. So I look forward to that as well. I would be remiss without mentioning my sponsors. I want to say thank you to Midpoint Consulting, and also thank you to IEEE. So IEEE is an international electrical engineering. I forget what the last E is for. Anyway, they really help. They help support us, and give back to the community. And we're trying to build a community of developers and doers and academics, and bring us all together with IEEE in the local Madison chapter. So if you're interested, please consider joining and talk to me later. Without further ado.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming. My name's Jorge, and I am a principal designer for my own agency called Ninth Floor. And lately, I've been working on founding a company called Frilly. Essentially, it's for AI tools for small businesses, local businesses. So I've been kind of going down the design rabbit hole for a long time. I'm classically trained designer, I guess you would say. I've been doing since like the late 90s, back in the print days. And, our tools have evolved over the last 20, 25 years. We used to do, Quark Express, and then that turned into Adobe InDesign, and then that turned into who does print anymore. But, you still have to use those tools. There's still use cases for them. So what ends up happening is like our tool set sort of expands, and our skill set does too. And we kind of have to meet each one of those tools in their own context, right? So I've been super impressed with a lot of the workflows that have been possible because of AI tools. So I wanted to share, and just a quick note, we're going to do one prompt, but you'll see that it still requires design know-how. You still need to know how to tell the LLM what your design is. But first to start, so the agenda real quick, quick intro, which we've done. And then over time, I've come, I do a lot of thinking as I'm working and trying to distill principles as I'm working with these tools because they're so powerful. So there's like 3 tenets that I've sort of nailed down as I'm working on this to keep myself sort of sane in the whole thing. Then we're going to go through a Figma to Replit workflow. Figma, Subframe, Cursor. These are Subframe and Cursor are both tools that I discovered. I guess a lot of people know about Cursor, maybe not that many about Subframe. And then we're going to do a straight prompt where it's just like crafted a prompt. We're going to pop it into an LLM on Replit, and then hopefully we'll see what happens. But and then we'll just have some Q&A. But also as I'm going, feel free to just sort of raise your hand and just ask about, because the type gets really small when we're doing the tools. So you'll see. So first with the tenets, right? The first one is context is everything. Like it really matters how you craft your communication to the LLM. So even if, just one word will make a difference, right? And so like, for example, here I asked it to give me a hello world screen for the Mac, like an early Mac or whatever. And that's all I asked it. I didn't give it any context at all. And came up with this, which is still kind of a cool animation, but it's not really what I was picturing in my head. In order to do that, you have to really spend a lot of time crafting your prompts, especially in the visual world. And we'll see more about that once we get to actually designing the page. So, in terms of like context, the context window of the LLMs has grown a lot. So even 2 years ago, prompt engineering was supposed to be the hot career, And it turns out that it isn't, because the LLMs got so powerful that, a single like sentence prompt is not, you could do a lot more. So a single or even a couple of sentences weren't that great. Then recently we, got vibe coding, which I know a lot of people cringed when that started becoming a thing, because it sort of implied that you were being loosey-goosey and just sort of letting the LLM do all the work, et cetera, which fair, I think that was part of it. But also, I think we've just sort of like evolved our processes as the LLMs get just more and more powerful. And then lately, the thing has become context engineering, right? So like context engineering is sort of like you actually think through your entire application, and you have markdown files, you have like that instruct the LLM on how to use certain tools to build you a legit application. I would say I'm sort of somewhere in between vibe coding and context engineering, because I'm not a hardcore developer, but I do spend a lot of time crafting my prompts in markdown files and documenting my app, so that as I'm building, I don't have to rewrite things. I just sort of point my agent to be like, hey, check out, this is what we're building, this is, et cetera, et cetera. So I like to, so Andrej Karpathy is the guy who coined the vibe coding term, but he also has recently, it was one of those things where he didn't mean to, and then the internet sort of took hold. And now he's sort of like, not walking it back, but also just backing the context engineering term, the delicate art and science and filling the context window, which is getting larger and larger with just the right information for the next step. And I think this implies a lot more deliberate exercise, a lot more thinking through your application, rather than just like, make it green, rounded corners, whatever, right? So this is just an example of one of my prompts. They can get really wordy, and this is just, this was, the LLM helps me and I edit it, but this was just, we were, for one of my applications, building a database. I had some experience with SQL, but not this much. But it's, and then I can get some really, really good results by being very specific. And it also kind of saves you tokens, because you don't have to like iterate as much. The second tenet is, what I like to say is just be fearless yet mindful, right? So the big thing with AI tools is you're not gonna break anything, like not in any sort of meaningful way. It's also not compared to the world where you're paying an agency a whole bunch of money per hour to build you something, and like one wrong decision was gonna take you down a path and it's gonna cost you a ton of money. If you use these tools, chances are you're not gonna be losing a lot of money. You're not gonna be, if you're not in production, if you're just experimenting, just go to town, go crazy. But also be mindful of the fact that, like, these are also just experimental technologies in many ways, right? And they're super powerful. So just kind of understand the context of where it is that we are at any given moment, and also understand that like what you're building now, maybe the capabilities in 3 months are probably going to be a lot different. Like for example, Claude Code didn't exist 3 months, or yeah, they were still sort of building it. So it's moving very quickly, and just if you try to stay, on top of the news, then that'll give you some pretty good idea of where you can build and how you can sort of like future-proof your skills, and just build with scalability in mind if that's one thing you're into. But also like, Mid-Journey's gotten super good. This was like, a couple of tries at wanting to get the right, just show me somebody jumping out of an airplane type of thing. So, it's, you can still tell it's AI, right? But it's still like not a lot of work. And the other thing is the sort of the social context of it, right? Like each one of these costs a lot of energy. So do we really need to be doing a whole bunch of stuff that we're not going to use for anything, right? So be mindful, I guess, is the fearless yet mindful. In terms of the mindful part, as far as design is concerned, we still have to do research. We still have to understand what product we're building. Are we building something for an actual problem? Are we building a solution, or are we just, and we have to do our, due diligence with people that are actually going to use the product, clients, customers, etc. You also still need to empathize. Like that's kind of our thing as human beings, as designers especially. A big part of our job is trying to sort of meet users where they are and trying to build something that makes their lives hopefully a little bit easier, a little bit better. So you still can do that. Like so far, the agents I've worked with, they're good at like making me feel good about myself, but they don't necessarily empathize with me. They're just machines, right? We still ideate, and that's actually one of the things where LLMs are getting very good at. They can actually come up with different variations. So your job really is more about curation, and we'll get to that in a minute. And you definitely still document, because these are large language models, so they can handle lots of language. So the more documentation you have, the better. But as a human, it's kind of your job to sort of think about the bigger picture. It doesn't really understand your bigger picture. It understands a lot of things, but it gets what you're feeding it. And then the fearless part is, like I was saying earlier, just the AI tools help you execute as fast as your human brain can handle. I'm actually realizing that I'm the bottleneck in all my projects. Like I'm just like, all right, I gotta take a break, and then the LLM could go indefinitely, or multiple ones could be doing. That's kind of one of the things I'm trying to get to, thanks to this guy's influence, to see if I can begin orchestrating my team of agents to just build nonstop. But we're not there yet. Or at least I'm not there yet. I'm sure some people are. And just, I think in terms of the fearlessness, I think a lot of people understandably are concerned about the sort of the impact of a lot of these technologies. And I think it's, I like this quote by Alan Kay, a computer scientist: the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Is let's participate. Like the more we participate in how these things are being used and designed, the more we're going to be able to sort of influence and impact the outcome. And just like the better off we'll be, because they really are just a multiplier in terms of efficiency and creativity. At least I've found them to be that way. I think whatever your particular sort of like professor of mine called it your personal monopoly is in terms of your skill set and your craft, these tools can make it a lot, just can make you produce a lot faster. And then the last one is AI makes and you curate, which is kind of alluded to earlier. Essentially, if you can develop a process where you know how you're prompting your tools and you're having it create something for you, it's kind of, then your job becomes more curation and judgment. And that's sort of the skill that's going to, because in a world where everybody can produce a whole bunch of things, we're still not all going to be consuming all of those things, right? There's still going to be things that need to be designed and curated specifically for our consumption, or maybe the machine's consumption, it doesn't matter. But you still, your ability to discern what's good and what isn't, your taste becomes a lot more important. Not that it's not important now, but right now we're having to spend a lot of time actually like pushing the pixels and et cetera, et cetera. So since this is a talk about UI, UX, like the principles still matter, right? Like I'm just gonna list, these are 5 of like 12, I think, that Jacob Nielsen, the sort of the godfather of UX, came up with. All of these things still apply when you're building, either using AI tools to build a website like we're gonna do in a little bit, or actually like using, building for those, like how, people are gonna be using these tools, and you're gonna be designing like the interface of like, we were talking about earlier, like, is it gonna, like the future is sort of like uncertain in terms of like, are we gonna have customizable UIs or just UIs that adapt to your taste as a human being, and you just sort of carry around a set of preferences and every app that you download is gonna be adapted to your preferences? We don't know, but I think at the end of the day, as designers, we still think about, visibility of system status. That means, are you logged in, logged out? Like, are you, like where are you on the screen? Flexibility and efficiency of use, I think more so with adaptability with AI, it's going to become more and more prominent. So a lot of these feel like are exacerbated by the technology and they're not going to be replaced. So as designers, our job becomes, just sort of shifts, right? It goes from like, loading paper into a printer to, whatever it is we're doing now. So one of the things I started to think about is like, I started to think of data as a new material. So rather than, block of marble and a chisel, like data is now the block of marble, and then these tools, Replit, Cursor, all of these things are my chisel, like how I sort of take a lot of like, whether the data is colors, whether the data is like squares, HTML, people's data, how I structure it, photographs, whatever, that becomes a sort of like a new medium. And so in terms of this quote, I'd highly recommend this book, Melanie Mitchell, if you want. It's called Artificial Intelligence, A Guide for Thinking Humans, because she's a researcher. She's been around for, I don't know, since the 80s, I want to say. But I think in the book, it really demystifies how AI works, not just LLMs. LLMs are one flavor of artificial intelligence, but it was really kind of helped me cement sort of my thinking around and sort of the adaptability you need to have in order to be open to these. So in terms of creativity, right, like being creative entails being able to understand and judge what one has created, and in that sense of creativity, no existing computer can be said to be creative. So I think if we approach designing with AI processes and tools in this way, feel like we'll get a lot better results. And I know that there's just a lot of anxiety about it in general in this space. So one note on hubris, I think, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And so basically, it's sort of like when you first start learning something, you think you know it all, and then your confidence is through the roof, right? Like, I know everything. And this most definitely happened to me when I first started using Replit, and I was just like, I'm superpower, rah! But then, inevitably, as I played around with it more, I understood how incompetent I was at a lot of the things that I thought like just 2 weeks before that I had down. And so, but the thing is, like, that's just our psychology, right? Like the confidence comes, the more you sort of encounter tasks that are new to you, as long as you keep going and you keep learning, then your confidence rebuilds, because over time you are building competence. Like as long as you don't give up and you keep, especially with these tools. Like I remember when, I was taking a black and white photography class, and I'd screw something up. That's like real paper and real, it's like, oh. But the paper was expensive when you're in the dark room and all that stuff, right? Here it doesn't. I mean, I guess again there is probably a cost, but it's not as impactful as it once was. So just keep playing around with it. Just keep building and seeing what happens and putting your stuff out there, iterating. So with that, I will, now that I can get off my soapbox for a little bit. The first demo we're going to do is essentially Figma. I don't know who uses Figma here. Yeah, so Figma recently, about a month ago, put out, actually Replit, the tool I use, put out a tool where essentially I can copy my Figma frame and paste it into Replit, and it just like builds the website for me. So I will show you first the design in Figma. So essentially, Figma is like it's layer-based. You have, I made a page for this presentation. You have all your layers here. And the trick to this is make sure that your auto layout is actually set up like you would, divs in HTML. So you kind of have to understand that. But essentially, I have my header. I have like my type, images, and this is just this presentation, like the big slides. And then just label them as containers. I took the time to name it, like the better you name your layers also, just the easier. Imagine if you're talking to an LLM, right? It's like if you're talking to somebody and just spouting gibberish, they're not going to understand you. So the more you kind of think about upfront of what you're going to be feeding it, the easier it's going to be. So that's this page, right? And then this is the Replit tool. So I'm going to take my entire frame here, this URL, and hopefully nothing breaks. And I will just import from Figma. So now we can just chat while it does its work. Anybody have any questions about this process in general? What's that? I don't think so. I think so. Yeah, I think it's an API. I think that MCP came after Replit did this. No. This is just my Replit account. It could be, maybe, I don't know. I haven't used the Figma MCP server at all. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, the big thing is a lot of these things, they don't get 100% right. Like you're not gonna get, just from that, it gets exactly what I designed. You still have to tweak it a little bit, and so it gets you 80% of the way there. But this handoff is where, everywhere I've worked, we could come up with these wonderful designs and hand them off to the developers. And it was always a negotiation and a battle. And, like they send us stuff and like, I don't get it. It looks kind of like what you sent. And you're like, no, it doesn't. That type is like the wrong size, or your padding there is way off, et cetera, et cetera. So this just saves a lot of time in that regard, because you'll be able to see, hopefully. I could just hand this to a developer and just be like, here, this looks exactly how I want it to look. Go to town. Up to them if they want to adapt the code or whatever. But like, I think in general, so it got pretty close. Like I said, it doesn't do it 100%. But this is, since I specified the fonts, it's actually, let's see how it does with mobile. Yeah, I didn't do the sort of mobile breakpoint because I didn't necessarily specify. But this is workable code. If I go in here, I get a Tailwind config with all of my colors, and it crashed. So if you wanted to go in and change whatever your primaries and et cetera, it's set up for you. So, and then in terms of your, yeah, it's hiccuping for some reason, but here's our app. So if I want to, oh, is that it? Nope. So if I really wanted to nerd out and come in here and change stuff, I could do that, right? And it just live does it. One cool thing about Replit that they added recently is if I'm here, I have this edit tool, or I can actually select, and it lets me, signing with AI, add mad AI. Like I can actually edit my designs, and this updates the code, et cetera, et cetera. So if you get to a point here where it's mostly for colors and like text. It doesn't, if you wanted to actually do, you can go into the card content, and then if you know enough HTML, you can start tweaking your designs this way. But that was what, like 3-4 minutes, right? So I went from a design handoff that used to take days, sometimes weeks, just because of whatever. It reduces the amount of time that, the communication that needs to happen. One neat thing is also you can just ask it to, can you document our progress so far in a markdown file? And it'll just create, oh, I guess this is related to the card. But anyway, so as a general rule, when I do a big feature, I ask it to do that, saves the markdown file in a documents folder, because, and then I back it up to GitHub, because there's always a chance that the thing is going to explode. Less and less so. Like when I first started using especially this tool back in January, February, there were times I had to restart a couple of times because I just kind of went down some rabbit holes and I couldn't get out of them. The context window has gotten so much bigger and it just understands so much better now that I haven't had to restart anything, knock on wood, in a few months. So yeah, so it's like, did it tell me where I put the migration progress? So it basically just sort of tells me, yeah, this is all the stuff we've done, and this is my documentation, right? And this is what we've done. You can put, sometimes I forgot to ask you to put a date, but typically once you get the hang of it, Replit now has this replit.md, which is this is like it stores your preferences. So over time, as you work with the agent in that project, yep.
Is it possible to prompt specific files with specific components?
Yes. So you could, so the way, so for example,
Question for the people at
oh yeah, there is one in the YouTube.
yeah, there's people online.
Oh, okay, yeah. I don't know if you mean they're asking questions, or?
No, can you repeat the question?
Oh, so the question was if it's possible to prompt specific components. So I would say here, for example, okay, we don't have. So my process is, for example, I want to do something here, and I just copy file path. Can you, I don't know, I'm just going to make it up, right? Change the font in, and this is the, the file path. So it's not going to do anything because it's not really going to know, but you can specifically refer to files or components. So you have, maybe it'd be easier if we use one of these components. I don't know which one I'm using, but I could use the same reference of that file, and if I know what I'm asking it to change, it would do it for you. Yep. So I don't know. I think you could do pretty much the same in Cursor. Anything where you have a file system, you can reference whatever your application has. Images, like can you swap this image for that image type of thing. So it's all on how you essentially directing the prompt to do the thing. So any other questions in terms of the sort of this Replit to Figma to Replit? It's just two apps basically. Yep.
So far in my workflow, like this part is awesome and easy, but the harder part is later in the design, you change fonts or dark mode. Oh yeah, I'll repeat it for YouTube.
Yeah.
So I was asking basically like, so the first initial transfer is easy, and then like,
Yep.
do you have any good tips for like, okay, you went back to the design, you changed fonts, dark mode, anything, and then you want to now bring those changes in, but keep all the rest of the progress you've already made?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, right? So if you're changing fonts and colors, that's on your tailwind, right? So, but I think being mindful of your components, because your components are what essentially makes up your page. So if you essentially modularize with components, right? So you can ask it, so right now none of these are components, but I could ask it, can you make a component of the quote, the blue quote square? And then that component, then if you change the font, this font to like Comic Sans or whatever, all of the components with the quote will change to whatever the font is. So that's one aspect of it. Is there something, more specific?
Well, yeah. So would you suggest? I guess. I'm sorry. For the online folks, so in that workflow, you still kind of like can't go back to the Figma doc, right? So is it kind of like do as much as possible in design first, and then from that on,
I'll show you next what Subframe does, because that's a good use case for Subframe, because it's like in Figma, if you change your Figma design, you'd still have to like, look at essentially what I end up doing with Figma is I have this whole thing. So then I'm like, if I change the color, I have to go here and remember to change it in Tailwind. So there's still a sort of like that process that does that. The next demo is Figma to Subframe, which is another design tool. And I just picked Cursor just to use something other than Replit, right? But that addresses a little bit of what you did. So you'll see, I don't know, have you used Subframe yet?
I haven't used that.
Okay. So it's essentially, it's a design tool. And so I have replicated the Figma design. It doesn't have a decent import tool yet, so I essentially go in here and recreate my design. So see, it has like layers, just like Figma does, and all of these are essentially mirroring to my components in the other design. There's like the whole thing. The key thing with this is that so I have my header. So if similar thing, if I say create component, right, it knows all the elements. And so then now I have this nav component, and if I were to make, and then what happens here is I can copy all of this code and put it into the application, right? So right now I'm using Cursor. So all of these are, all of this is my code on my page. So if I change this, if I were to change this font and I already have it installed on the site, then every instance of that component is going to change without me having to go either into the code. You would just have to, if you have a developer, if you do it yourself, you would just like push essentially this. They have a command line tool. It's still very like nerdy because you still have to go in and update your components, whatever, in the tool. But that's sort of like that's why I personally really like this tool, because I can, I change my card to have a green button instead of a purple one. I don't have to go and change the instances. I don't have to redesign anything. And my design stays within the context of my page. So does that make sense? Yeah, anybody else? So essentially here what happens is I have my page. This tool has like multiple exports. You can export to Bolt, you can export to Replit, which doesn't work very well. You can export to Cursor. So in the Cursor export really is like they generate a setup prompt. So what this does, it sets up your Vite server. Am I getting that pronunciation correct? Sometimes I say Vite and developers are like, oh. Yeah, Vite? Okay, so it sets up my yada, 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 whatever. All I need to know is I can copy this, and then I go into Cursor, and I did this already, so we wouldn't have to wait. But essentially, I pasted all of the instructions. It got into a little bit of trouble. We figured it out because Cursor is smart. And then it built here on the left. This is my application. It just, as a designer, I'm not necessarily like worried about or want to care about like servers and stuff, but I have been getting into it just because it's interesting. But anyway, so it builds my application, my page. In this case, it's not quite an application, but it just builds my page, and I have it runs it on a local machine, right? Like using the tool, and that is actually here. So Subframe Vite starter, and it's running on my local host. Same page. And the thing with this is like the only thing that's kind of broken is the font, because I didn't import the correct font in my Google font. I did these, but I didn't do this one. So I kind of just left it there as a way to see how, you still have to know like where the plugs are. But again, very like relatively next to no code, essentially. So now for the really fun one. The next one was just a prompt, right? So I, essentially just took the design, kind of cheated a little bit, because if you really were doing a raw prompt, you would just be coming up with the page as you're writing. But essentially just describe what, I know the type is really small, but this is the page we have, right? And I just kind of created a markdown file that says, this is what we're building. You give it some context. We're creating a single web page that distills the highlights of a presentation on using AI tools to design websites. And then you specify the colors. And the way I think of this is like, I used to have to write this stuff for developers back in the day. I'd design something like an interface in Photoshop, and then I'd have to like cut up the images and essentially do this and hand it over to a developer, a front-end developer, who then would build the thing. So this is just, it's the same exercise, except now it happens a lot quicker. So let me take this whole file, and we'll create I'm just going to use Replit because it'll build it quicker. So please create a web page using the attached markdown. Oops, the touch. Is it markdown? It's txt. So I'll just change the you can see my mess here. I'm just changing it to a markdown file so that it doesn't. Attached markdown file. And we'll see what happens. It worked okay at the the last time I did it, but you never know. Oop, wrong thing. And let's go. And this is, it doesn't know any design. It isn't, just telling it in sort of plain English with some like hex colors thrown in and just descriptions of the things I want. This process takes about as long as the other one, importing Figma. It's essentially picking. I'm just letting it pick its tech stack. Typically, Replit picks a, Shadcn, and that's the framework for images, and it's starting to kind of build it. See what it's doing. Any questions so far? I can share. So when we're done, this will have like a web page that you can access. So that has the links to all this stuff. So, yep.
So this is obviously like a cloud platform, right? So is there any way to use GitHub with it to
Yes,
push our changes?
I will. Actually, while it's doing that, I can show you one of my actual projects. It does have Git, right? So, and I haven't pushed in a while, so I'm just going to push my stuff. And I have it plugged in already to a GitHub repository. So you can download obviously from a GitHub, or I mainly just use it as backup really, because like I said, you never know if something's going to bork, and then I can recall it pretty easily. Anybody else? Wait, where were we? Oh, there we go. So it got pretty close. It even added some links, it looks like. I got the font, cool, because I actually specified the link. So you see like some of the alignment of the boxes of the containers is a little bit off, but on the whole, I feel like, yeah, sure, just build it. And it doesn't have to do much because it already did most of the building. But see how like, maybe these fonts are a little big. I guess it's still kind of going. But again, gets you like 80% of the way there. If you're sort of designing in sort of like a bigger org and your job is to just do certain components, same thing applies, right? You can have your design system sort of be your source of truth, and that tells the colors, the properties to all the elements you use in a login box. If that, like, your sole job is to make sure the login box works. You can have that in the system, and you can make edits. If you're one of the toughest things I find is like managing like the changes in design systems, when especially in a bigger organization and you have designers that are like actively like designing a new like whatever layout, but they don't use some of the tokens you use in the design system, and then all of a sudden you have like kind of a mess, right? Like I think those are some of the things that you still need the management with these tools, but it's a little bit, I'm working on like 4 different projects right now, but I'm able to sort of manage them because I have this sort of like what I keep calling a superpower. Feels like a superpower. Yeah. So, any questions on this last process? Where it was just the prompt and editing stuff. Now, this is one where I would have to actually go in here and do a lot of, once it's done, do a lot of sort of like tweaking around, which I don't have to do if I'm coming from Subframe. But I have to do it up front. So one way or the other, you still have to do either up front or you do it afterwards. It was beaten into me in design school to just sort of get pixel perfect right away. So this Subframe actually helps me be a lot more pixel perfect. So, any other questions? Yep. Send them pass around the mic.
Wrong mic?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for the workflow where like a developer has, let's say, just like iterated through a few versions of a product, but like with basically no design, right? Just using Shadcn, but just like really plain and simple.
Yep.
And then they hire a designer, and they're like, okay, awesome. The designer's now really polished a lot of things, thought through UX, maybe changed a few things, but it's like a really good human iteration. Now, how do you prompt the AI to take this existing code and like apply this design, right? Like in a way that would be a typical workflow without AI.
So I think, so essentially you get an MVP with the tools that are available, and you come on to just sort of elevate the design.
Yeah, exactly.
I think at that point, it kind of depends on how much the designer is willing to get their hands dirty on these types of tools, because you could, so the way to think about it is keeping the context throughout the application. So like, which ones are components that the Shadcn is using, and so it's almost like designing backwards, right? So you're like, take that component and how is that, and even you could bring it into Figma if you really wanted to nerd out and like rack up those hours, because you could like redesign the entire application modularly, right? Like deconstruct what they've done, so you kind of have to understand what Shadcn is doing, right? Like which components Shadcn is using, et cetera, et cetera. It would be a little harder to go the other way, because then they'd have to rebuild a lot of stuff, unless you convince them to use, like your, what you build can get turned into the Shadcn probably, like just sort of like what we did with Replit. And then they would just have to take that and plug in the back end, which, by the way, you can still do yourself. If you could tell it, depending on what the stack is. And if it's JavaScript, it can pretty credibly build you a working application. You could work with that developer in the same environment and then just sort of like, what's the word for that? Pair programming? Would that be pair designing? So, yeah, like collaborate. Like I think so I mentioned Jacob Nielsen before. He's like one of the sort of the leading people about UX or whatever. And so I read him because he's still relevant, keeping relevant, even though he's a lot older. But I think the idea is that teams can collaborate a lot more efficiently, right? So if you're working with a developer, rather than the mentality being like you hand it over to me and I build it, all right, let's get together and just sort of hash this out, because it could actually be done in literally like hours instead of like days of going back and forth. So, then that's why this is good for both, right? Like if developers in the audience actually have some sort of sense of design, you can actually build something that looks really good if you sort of spend some time, crafting, etc. And vice versa. If you're a designer and you just want to like, this Replit has the advantage of having its own sort of PostgreSQL database. So if you want to experiment and import a bunch of data and just let's see what I can build with, like, I don't know, like what I did with my project is like, I'll just scrape a bunch of like venue event websites and build a tool that helps me find what's happening in Madison this week, type of thing. It's a little bit of, it's not as straightforward as that, but I think if you can imagine it, you can probably build it, and you have the patience and the time to do it. So, anything else? Yep, sorry.
For all the people at home.
I'm sorry, I missed the first 5-10 minutes. So if you touched on this before, like why this specific combo of tools?
Just honestly, just as I discovered them, because there's Lovable, there's Bolt, there's I don't know any others. Yeah. So I just for my personal preference, Replit worked because of the layout. Like I don't really get this with Cursor unless I'm setting it up wrong, but preference, really, because they all use the same engine under the hood, and this is using Claude. Also there's nuances, right? So this one now tells me, so this is 34 cents to build it, so I can keep track of like, spending. If I hit $100, I'm like, oh, but I've actually built the whole thing. When I first started, I tried a bunch, and this was the one I liked. And I just gave them my money for a year, and I've been using it since. So I was saying, be fearless. Like, I should follow my own advice and try Cloud Code. I just haven't, because I've been sort of like, but it's hard, it's command line. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be a while till the dust settles in terms of like what tools are going to be like the industry standard. Like Figma is right now the industry standard for sort of, I want to say, the old way, which is changing rapidly. They're trying to keep up. Figma now has Figma Make, which is essentially what I just did with the prompt. I haven't used it. I tried to use it a couple times, and it was frustrating. So it has a ways to go. It doesn't have a database. There's a lot of sort of, I couldn't output I couldn't go back and forth between Figma, to your point. Like once Figma Make had done its thing. I couldn't just go back to my design and change something and have Figma, which would be sort of what would differentiate it from everything else. So I don't even know if they necessarily care, because they're going towards the like enterprise, like, you know, the big accounts that pay them a lot of money, and the sort of designers are, you know, a lot of people are using Framer now too. But Framer, as far as I know, doesn't have any AI tools yet. So, but it's kind of, you know, it's confusing, but it's also, if you find a tool that works, use that. Yep. Just chuck it.
I was just asking, I have some difficulty with, like, can it just build web pages, or can it also build Electron, build desktop apps with Electron or stuff? Because right now what I have is, I have a website and a UI for it, but I want to translate that UI into a desktop application.
Oh, okay.
And I'm trying to use Electron for it, but the CSS themes are not really converting over really well. There's some dependency issues. So
Yeah, I haven't. So I know that we can do like iOS and Android apps on this. I don't really know like what you. I mean, could you use? I know some people here have been using like Xcode for like apps and stuff. I honestly haven't, you know, experimented with that.
Yeah, I can't speak for Replit specifically, but definitely like there are tools like Cloud Code, Cursor, Gemini.
Right.
Like
Yep.
can do pretty much every programming language.
Yep. So you, but you know, yeah. Right, and I would imagine the knowledge base is a lot, yeah. Yeah, because you got to remember that Cloud Code is also trained on like Stack Overflow and, you know, like stuff that's like open languages, I guess I would say.
It just has command line access, so like with Electron apps, with Xcode, with Android, a lot of that stuff is very heavily dependent on not just a single environment,
Right.
but multiple different external tools.
Right, and you have to, yeah, so good luck.
yeah, thank you. I will.
Yeah. Anyone else? I think, and yeah, and just I will share. Oh, where's my Figma? Yeah, we did that. Any other questions? And then, yeah, thank you. That's, if you scan that, that'll take you to the actual web page for this talk, which I think it's public. Hopefully you can see it. But it's just, what is it? mad-ai.replit app. And this is live on the interwebs. So the bottom, it has all the links to the things I sort of talked about. So cool. And with that,
All right, let's give it up.
cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jorge. I appreciate it, and thanks everyone for attending. Does anyone have any questions, any further questions? I know there was a lot of banter back and forth. Okay, great. Want to let you know that I just posted our next event, which is going to be August 18th. It's going to be a little bit different of an event. It's going to run from noon till 5 p.m. on Monday, which is part of the Madison Forward Fest conference. And we are doing, we're actually going to have a two-for. We're going to have a talk about essentially these automated tools on developing applications, further and expanding what Jorge provided. But then also we're going to have a hackathon afterwards. So we're going to have a 3-hour hackathon that is going to have anyone that's going to be here sign up and build applications using these tools right in this event. So looking forward to seeing what we can do and what we can build, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone that's here and your friends, tell your friends, and come and geek out together, okay, guys? Thank you so much. And thank you again for attending.
Thank you.